me just say a few things while we're getting ready to get started, and I'll repeat this briefly in a minute. There are two functions in Zoom. One is the question and answer, and the other is the chat. The chat we're not using at all tonight, so we're not actually monitoring the chat, but we will be using the Q&A, and I'll explain that in just a minute when we get started in earnest. I've seen a couple of chat comments try to come through, but we're just gonna suppress that whole chat box because with a couple of 200-300 people on, that would get overwhelming. So, but we will be using Q&A. And we can't hear, only the panelists' audio or video are coming through. So I think we should go ahead and get started. We still have some more people. They'll hopefully roll in and join us here in a minute. So let me switch graphics here. And let me get everything arranged here. So my name is Peter Politis. I'm the Executive Director of Dallas Center for Photography. And joining me is Becca Deruzet. Becca, will you raise your hand there? Becca is the Education and Programs Director at DCP, and tonight is acting as a producer and co-host. We had over 300 people sign up for this tonight. We're at about 200 so far, so we'll probably get some more coming in. DCP is a 501c3 nonprofit near the Design District in Dallas, and until a couple of months ago, we taught classes and workshops and held events and gallery exhibits at the center. We have a really beautiful exhibition space. It's the only space in the region that's dedicated just to photography as a non-commercial space. Like everyone, we've moved online for now, but we continue to have classes and events. Besides this one, there's also a workshop with the same Picturing Home theme. It starts next week, and it'll be led by Patrizia Montanari, one of the photographers on the panel tonight. There's also a juried exhibition that closes the end of June, and that's being judged by Nancy Borowick, who's also with us tonight. And more information, of course, is on the website. This webinar is part of our Picturing Home theme, which we actually started working on well over a year ago, long before the pandemic changed what home looks like for most of us. We believe that family photojournalism and documenting the things in our everyday lives is one of the best examples of the power of photography. And that's kind of the mission at DCP, is to spread and foster the use of photography at all levels by everyone. The event tonight is presented at no charge, and the panelists have very generously donated their time, which included phone calls, emails, editing bios, and Zoom practice sessions. So I want to thank each of them for their time. We've had no sponsor for this event, so if you find this event helpful and you'd like to help DCP continue this kind of programming, please consider making a donation, through our website. And joining DCP as a member would be even more fantastic. There's plenty of information, and there's a list of member benefits and that sort of thing. So the format tonight will have each of the panelists taking about 10 minutes to show photos and talk about their work. And then we'll have a question and answer session. And like I said earlier, the chat feature is disabled tonight, but the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen will let you ask brief questions. The questions won't go directly to the panelists. We're going to be curating those questions. We'll select certain questions to present to the panel to keep things flowing. We only have 90 minutes tonight. There's a lot to cover, and we want to try to get done on time. If we go a few minutes over, if everybody's okay with that, that's great, but we're going to try to stick to our schedule. So about those panelists, let me give you just a very brief overview, and you can see their names on screen, but you guys might want to take a bow when your name is mentioned. Nancy Borowick is an internationally known photographer, author, teacher, and speaker. Working regularly with the New York Times since 2013, Nancy has told the intimate stories of people and places from every corner of the globe, winning her many accolades and awards. Ed Kashi is a seasoned photojournalist, filmmaker, and educator who has covered topics as diverse as the impact of oil in Nigeria to the domestic issues around an aging America. Ed has a very sensitive eye and an intimate and compassionate relationship to his subjects, which are signatures of his intense and unsparing work. Patrizia Montanari was raised in Milan, Italy, and has experienced and created art all her life. Portraits are her passion, and people are her biggest inspiration. She's currently working on a photography project for her gender-free clothing line, another business that she has. And the photo that she's working on is inspired by The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. If you check her out on Instagram, you'll see some behind-the-scenes footage of what that's looking like. Terra Fondriest is a documentary photographer living in the Ozarks of Arkansas with her husband and 2 children, and is currently working on a project capturing the people, culture, and landscape of these rural mountains. Christopher Lee, Chris, is a Korean-American photographer based in San Antonio and is represented by the 7 agency, VII, with their mentorship program. His first published story in the New York Times was about illegal bike racing, and he continues to cover issues of forced migration, subcultures, and vulnerable communities. And as you'll find out in a minute, he's joining us from the road.
Yep.
Yep. And Kirsten Lewis, Kirsten Lewis is a documentary family photographer based in Denver, Colorado. Although she has been shooting for more than 20 years, it was teaching on Creative Live that really brought her approach to documentary family photography to the forefront as a desirable alternative traditional family photography. So I'd like to thank all of you a lot for being here tonight and making time. I think 3 of our panelists one of them's in the middle of an assignment, and I think 2 others came from assignments today. So good news that there's a lot of assignment work out there and y'all made time for us. So I'm going to start with Nancy, and I'll give a little bit of an intro to each of them. We'll start with Nancy first. Let me change a screen here so I can get us ready. So Nancy is a New Yorker, born and raised, having lived all over the state, and she now calls Brooklyn home. In 2016, looking for a change of scenery and pace after the death of her parents, she and her husband moved to the Pacific island of Guam, the only person I've ever known from Guam. A few years later, they returned home to New York, where they live with their island dog, Einstein, the best phrase I've seen in a long time, and their newest addition, a 7-month-old baby boy named Levi. Nancy?
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Peter and Becca, for organizing this, and the other panelists and everyone who's joining us this evening. So home means something different for everyone. And when I think about home, some words come to mind: memory, identity, comfort, family, connection, reflection, frustration, vulnerability, and now motherhood. When I'm photographing home, I try to think about these themes as lenses through which I can see this space and my world in a new and unique way. As a young photojournalist, I felt like the most important stories were the ones far from home. And to really connect and make an impact with my work, I had to be anywhere but here. I had many teachers and mentors, including Ed, who encouraged me instead to look to my own life. And as many say, you know, photograph what's in your backyard. But that felt boring and a little too familiar to keep my interest. Then everything changed. Cue the photos.
Yeah, here we go. Hold on. There we go.
Okay, let me just make sure I also do this right. Okay, I think I've done this right. Mm-hmm. My father was diagnosed with inoperable terminal pancreatic cancer, and my mother was already in treatment with stage 4 breast cancer. And they were together side by side, and this was our new normal. Okay. I had to shoot this. I had to be there with them to tell their story, advocate for them, care for them the best I could, I needed to spend time with them, not knowing how much time we had left. Sorry, I'm trying to, there we go. They were my home and my life, and now everything was sort of falling apart. I needed to make sense of all of it, and by photographing, I found comfort and even greater purpose in my life in the process. And frankly, also, I was worried that without my camera glued to my face, I would have completely fallen apart. I think it was my armor, and it allowed me a bit of a safe distance from the reality of what was happening. These images keep my parents' memory and legacy alive, and what a gift they are for me, because I have them to share with future generations and my children, especially because I want to remember this time in our lives. There was so much joy and strength, but also deep sadness and grief. But I want to remember all of that because that's all part of the universal human experience. Today, however, Picturing Home looks a little different for me. Yep, that's me covered in baby throw up. But I found beautiful light, so I had to take a picture of it. I had to remember this moment.
Great look.
I had a difficult time being pregnant, and I struggled to figure out how to process what I was going through. So as I did with my parents, I decided to use my camera as a way to understand the changes happening in my life and hopefully help myself move forward through what I was dealing with. One of my favorite quotes is by Robert Frost. He wrote, "The best way out is always through." And I think that is so relevant to what we are all going through today, because, we have to go through. As a new mom and a person living in this pandemic world, I spend most of my time at home, like many of you. And while it's been, challenging to balance holding a 24-pound baby on one side and a camera on the other, I try to keep it within arm's reach, because you never know when that nice light will strike.
Sorry.
Oh, I couldn't tell if I was doing that.
No, nobody's doing that.
Technology.
Sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
Okay.
You'll have to click in once. There we go.
Got it.
Oh, wow.
Talk about nice light. I was so excited, but also he was so asleep, so I had to be very careful. So most of the images I've taken in this time over the last couple of months will likely never see the light of day. I mean, other than on this platform in this moment. But I'm glad they exist, because I want to hold on to the memories. This is such a unique time in our lives, and I want to remember that. I know photographing home can feel mundane at times, but maybe you need to allow yourself to start seeing home through a new lens and point of view. I actually had this talk with myself yesterday, realizing that I had not been shooting all that much, and I felt really stuck creatively and a bit lost. And it was almost like I was feeling all these things because I wasn't shooting, but I wasn't shooting because I was feeling all these things, that headspace you can get into. But then I decided, okay, I'm going to get out of my own way and challenge myself, thinking, what if picturing home could be from the perspective of, say, our family dog? Which this is nice. Literally, he parks himself there like all day, every day with, I mean, this is how the relationship is developing.
That's
And
great.
he's finally seeing the value in this new member of our family.
Wonderful.
So,
Waiting for food scraps.
oh, you bet. Oh, you bet. Um, you could also challenge yourself to shoot less literally and try to capture how you're feeling, which is easier said than done, but thoughtful advice that I've kept with me for years from a trusted advisor of mine. There's, I know, I'm such a new mom. I'm like, look at my adorable baby.
Nancy, you make me want to have a baby again.
Oh, no.
So there's no right or wrong way to picture home. There's no such thing as too many photographs or not enough, because this isn't a competition. We're all in this together. So just keep your camera handy, and on occasion, maybe ask yourself, what does home mean to you?
Thank you.
That's my story.
Thank you very much.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. That shot looking up at the baby. I'll just steal it and pretend it's mine. Okay.
I took it yesterday.
Awesome.
I felt the inspiration and the pressure of this talk.
So it worked. Thank you. So
Thank
we're gonna move on to Ed Kashi. Ed was born in New York City, a first-generation American whose parents came from Baghdad. They were Jewish, so for his mom and his dad, it was truly the start of a new life in a new world, escaping the growing violence against the ancient Jewish community that had lived in peace in Baghdad for millennia. After graduating from Syracuse University with a degree in photojournalism, Ed moved to San Francisco and lived there for 25 years. That's when he started his career, met his wife, and started a family. 16 years later, they moved back to the East Coast to New Jersey to take care of his father-in-law. Ed wanted to return to the New York area because he just loves it there. Ed and his wife have 2 kids who are now grown and just out of college. Ed?
Welcome. Thank you, Peter and Becca. And Nancy, thank you for that presentation. I always love watching you present. So you're so full of life. You know, home for me is normally a distant place. I'm normally on the road 8 months out of the year, working all over the world, all over the country. And so for me, this pandemic has been, like for many people, you know, a real sort of, I don't know, a slap in the face of a new reality. I'm happy to report that in my 29-year relationship with Julie, my wife, we have never spent so much time together, and we're doing well. Which for anyone who knows me and her reinforces her saintliness. Anyway, and our son is in San Francisco. He works as a mechanical engineer in a startup in Silicon Valley, and our daughter just graduated from Michigan, and she's home now. And so it's wonderful to have her around. But you know, the last 2.5 months have been, you know, very so many things. It's been stressful. It's been incredibly sad. A couple of very dear people have passed. A neighbor as well. You know, New Jersey, I think we've had almost 11,000 deaths. So it's a very, very significant how it has hit us here. So I can't keep still. So what I have done in the last 2 months is what I've always done, which is figure out something that I care about, figure out a way to engage with the world using photography, in this case, visual storytelling. I've not been shooting any video. And I decided to look at sort of the volunteers and volunteerism and within the state of New Jersey. And so for the past 2 months, I've been photographing that theme. And then last week, I was fortunate enough to have the New York Times op-ed page publish that photo essay. So, you know, it was yet again for me, not an example, but a kind of, you know, a proof of that if you build it, they will come. You know, if you sit around and do nothing, nothing will happen. If you create, something will happen. And beyond that, it's just important to me to be engaged with the world. And so while I've been home more than I can remember in the last 30 or 40 years, I've also been going out almost every day photographing. And it's been interesting. It's almost been like a form of therapy for me, to go out into this somewhat treacherous world, being in the New Jersey area. I've always said that when you're near death, you never feel more alive. It's not that dramatic right now for me, thank goodness, and my family are safe. But anyway, so the act of photography for me works on multiple levels. Beyond just making a living and getting published and all that. It's being a journalist, it's reporting, it's engaging with the world, it's meeting people. I got to witness so many beautiful things in the last 2 months. It's also, as a native New Yorker, it has further eroded, or it's further increased my love for New Jersey and the people of New Jersey, which I view as sort of the people of America, really. So anyway, we cut to some pictures, please. All right, thanks. So I was on the road, I can't remember, it was the first week of March, I think is when I returned. I live in Montclair, New Jersey. It's just 12 miles west of New York City. And let me see, hold on. Just want to advance here. There we go. And so those are the railroad tracks to Manhattan. And these days, that 12 miles is very, very far and quite foreboding. I sort of I've followed two tracks in the last couple of months. One was producing this photo essay about volunteerism, but the other was photographing at home. This is my family, my wife and my son Eli, and my daughter Isabel. I'm sure for many of you, this is how we've stayed in touch. Doing Skype calls, and it's been really tremendous to stay close with them, even in this detached way. I've also volunteered at a local food kitchen, Tony's Kitchen in Montclair. When I was grounded in early March, I realized, like, this is serious. I'm not going to be able to travel abroad. I can't even really travel out of the state. What am I going to do with myself? Well, and also, what am I going to do with all this free time I have? And so one of the ways I decided to use that extra time, which I normally never have, is to volunteer at this food kitchen. And it's interesting because from this experience, I actually met one of the subjects who ended up being actually the lead picture of the New York Times piece. And also, it's just that, I've always photographed people and organizations who are contributing and volunteering. And so it felt good for once to put my camera down and actually, contribute in that way as well. Online yoga classes. This is my wife and one of our 3 cats. This is Luana, and I don't think she's doing yoga, but anyway, she's stretching for being pet. I wake up early and I'm waking up 5 or 6 in the morning, and this is back, I think, in April, and when it was still kind of cold. We don't get springs anymore. I don't know how it is for you guys wherever you are, but at least in the New York, New Jersey area, we don't get a true spring anymore. It kind of goes from winter through a cold spring to the summer. And then this must have been about a month ago, our neighbor across the street died from COVID. We did not know him. He was in his early 60s. Actually, my daughter went to school with his daughter. And so this was on a Sunday at noon. About 30 or 40 neighbors came out on the street with candles. And we knew that his wife was leaving to bury him. And it was quite a moving scene. Everyone was sobbing, and it really brought home, incredibly close, what is going on. Then 2 days later, there was this scene on literally the exact same patch of earth. And this was our neighbor's four-year-old birthday party. And he's a Star Wars freak. And somehow his parents, our neighbors, knew this 7'6" tall Darth Vader actor, and I'm so happy that I happened to go out on the street when I heard all the hubbub, and I made this image. So this sort of cycle of life, the same exact spot in 2 different days. What a difference. So Julie, my wife, is early on in the pandemic when we were at home, she looked at me and she was like, I was made for this. And I was like, what do you, I was like, what do you mean? She goes, she's the child of parents who grew up during the Depression. And I have a feeling that's it, that she said, I've always known that something like this would happen. And so it's so obnoxious. She's sewing masks for all the neighbors. She's knitting a sweater. She's, tending to her garden. I mean, it's just, taking care of me. Well, we take care of each other. But anyway, it's been quite beautiful to be with her during this time. This is my studio manager, Brenda Bingham, who I love dearly. And this is about as close as I've gotten to her in the last 2 months. She was coming to drop off a hard drive. She's been working remotely. It's been one of the harder things to not have Brenda around because she's also a dear friend. This was a moment when I came back from a shoot. I did decontaminate before I kissed her. And I was online at the local pharmacy, and I love it. This elderly gentleman just decided while he was waiting online to do some stretching exercises. So you never know what you'll see, right? This is just in our home. I find myself, maybe many of you feel this way, but I'm looking at my home in a completely different way. I'd like to say also that I've gained such an appreciation for so many people and things in my life. I've been referring to it as almost like a granular look at my life. Normally I'm going at hyper speed. I'm rarely home more than a week or two straight before hitting the road. It's a frenetic kind of a life, and I've gotten used to it because that's all I've been doing for almost 40 years. And so to be forced to stop has taught me to look more carefully, but also appreciate things that I would normally scoff at or think, oh, that's not important, whether it's flowers or it's, just the simplest things, spending time with our cats. But anyway, I hope all of you who are homebound, or certainly homebound more than you normally are, will take this extra time and this extra sort of mental space we have to appreciate the people and the things around us, including cooking and eating good food. We have a chicken, so again, Julie's the chicken master too. It's so obnoxious. No, I'm joking. But anyway, it's actually kind of amazing to be so blessed to have a mate like her, she's also working, full time, running Talking Eyes Media, the production company that we have, and she's devised a wonderful project, Stories from the Pandemic, where she's got about 8 or 9 high school and college youth in Newark, New Jersey, and she's coaching them to report on their lives at home. And I think it's going to be published next week in the New York Times as well. We went a few weeks ago on a hike in upstate New York. It was amazing. It's taking walks and hikes is something we all can do. Yes, this was when it was still very cold and rainy. Thankfully, it's getting a little warmer. Anyway, there you have it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you. We are going to move on to Patrizia, and that's how you pronounce it, whether you're in Italy or not. It's Patrizia Montanari. It sounds like a song. Patrizia actually used to teach at DCP. She was born in Milan, Italy. I love it that every time you write that down, Patrizia, you say Milan, Italy.
Well, I should say Milano, right?
Milano, yeah. Patrizia's first job while in college was to take headshots of 1,500 employees of an insurance company using a Polaroid. But it wasn't until 15 years later, after experimenting with painting, that she started taking photography seriously and made it her passion and her business when she moved to McKinney, just north of Dallas. And that's when we met her. In between, she lived, studied, and worked in the fashion business in New York City, Dortmund, Germany, Florence, Amsterdam, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Patrizia and her family have been happily settled in Portland for the last few years, but she still considers Italy to be her home and the place where her parents, her extended family, and a good part of her heart live. So Patrizia.
Thank you, Peter. Well, before I start talking about what home is to me, I'd like to thank Dallas Center for Photography because it's been the true starting point for my photography adventure. Peter has been a great mentor to me throughout this year. And since the first time I met him, he gave me enough confidence and it validated my work. I knew I had an eye, but I didn't know that I could actually take pictures. So thank you for that. I just want to tell everybody to consider taking classes with Dallas Center for Photography, because if you love photography, if you have a passion for it, there's a lot to learn. And I'm hosting a class in June. It's a series of 4 classes throughout the month. And we're going to learn about how to take better pictures inside your home and use natural light and build things inside your home that is going to help you making better pictures. So home, where is home to me? I'm going to start with the first picture. I lived in so many places, and I always loved the fact that I was able to just pack overnight and move on to the next place until I actually moved to Portland, Oregon, where I live right now with my family. This is a perfect shot that actually represented the perfect scenario where my whole family is sitting together around the table, and this is the way I grew up. Those are my parents. They live in Italy. My whole family lives in Italy right now. So it's been really, really hard during the last few months living with the idea that everybody in Italy was in such big danger. And I lost an uncle to COVID-19 recently. It was my dad's brother. And just being so far away and not being able to know how long it's going to be until I'm going to see them all again, it's just been difficult, you know. And there's no I also, there's actually an interesting part of this. I would have loved to be in Italy right now, because I'm imagining the cities are, you know, that they're available to, with no people around, to take the best shots right now. So that would have been a great opportunity for me to be there. But back to this picture, I just love the fact that it shows what my kids' personality looks like. My son doesn't suck his thumb anymore. He's wearing a t-shirt that says Italia. I just love that everybody is like busy doing something, and I love the light and the perfect time of the day. It's like it's not a stage image, but it represents what imperfection sometimes can create perfection. Another reason why, another thing that I miss about Italy is the fact that, sorry, let me just, it's the fact that my kids are not able to grow up with my Italian family. So when my parents come here, we get the chance to like cook together, and my mom is an amazing cook, and she makes pasta from scratch, the best pizza ever. So these images just remind me of the fact that growing up, I was helping my mom in the kitchen a lot, and I miss that about Italy and my family. And growing up, being around the table was one of the most important, the biggest memory that I have, the most important part of my life. And in this case, my mom is making a dish that it's made with ricotta cheese. And I remember my dad actually used to make ricotta at home. And yeah, it's just sad that my kids cannot experience all that. But one thing that the food world taught me, and the cooking was, it taught me a lot about patience. It taught me a lot about precision and appreciation of art. But it also taught me a lot about preserving traditions. And it's something that I also try to use in remembering photography every day. This is a picture I took of my parents when I lived in McKinney, Texas, just north of Dallas. And my parents didn't know at all what I was about to do. And I think it's one of the reasons why this picture came out well is because they actually had no idea, you know, and I just told them to pose that way, and they did it. I love how my son is looking at them. And I remember someone, I think maybe Peter told me that he reminded him of a urban Gothic shot. I often take images with my iPhone because it's easy, and it's just, I just want to be able to capture moments really quick. But this was an actual image taken with like strobe and a professional camera and all that. So I'm just proud of this. And I'm going to, yeah, my son is also standing the same way that my dad stands. So I really love that part. I'm having a hard time moving the pictures. This is this is an image of a very simple place that you will find in every little town in Italy. It's called the Oratorio, which is the little cafe bar next to a church. And it's usually in the center of town, and it's where community gathered together. It's a very cold, to me, it represents what the culture is in Italy. And, you know, I love, my parents are like spoiling my children right now. And I can see that level of simplicity that people don't really see when they go visit Italy as a tourist. It's just a very, very simple moment that makes me appreciate where I'm from. And this is actually what I think people think about Italy when they're trying to picture something in their mind. It's a beautiful place in Umbria. Some friends moved to Umbria when they retired, and they found this beautiful apartment inside the town clock, and they renovated it, and they had this beautiful window looking into the countryside. I love the composition and the circle inside the square, and then I cropped it into a square. So this one takes me to my friends. They moved over there. They're a gay couple. They moved into this very close-minded town in the center of Italy. And I just absolutely loved that they did that. And we became friends when I lived in Sausalito in Northern California. And I went through the decision of them moving to Italy while I was there. And I helped them renovating their home. And every time I go back now, I go and visit them, even though I have to drive 6 hours to go and see them. They make me feel at home every time I go. And this is another way of describing home to me. I met this couple here in Portland. They're a Japanese couple. They wanted to thank me and my husband for welcoming them to Portland and for our friendship, I guess. So they booked a dinner made by a chef, a retired chef that cooks beautiful traditional Japanese dinner in his own home here in Portland. And so it was the four of us eating at this chef's house. It was a beautiful moment. These two friends, they barely speak English, but around the table, we found each other understanding each other perfectly. It was a great evening. My husband and I were so loud, like European loud, and they were very calm and very well put together. So this is just represents different culture, but still a very beautiful way to feel at home. This is an image that I took while I was traveling to India. I went to India with a client to photograph girls in a school environments over there. And while I was there, it was also an important time of my life because I decided to start my clothing line. I was visiting a bunch of production companies over there. I was really, really overwhelmed by the culture, the Indian culture. While I was in one of these places for business, I looked outside of the window and I saw these three women. There are actually three women with a child. One is hiding behind the window. You can't see it, but they're all three of them are taking care of this one child, and there is so much love going on, and they're running around with this child. You don't even know who the mother is. It was just a very beautiful moment that reminded me of how present we should be with our children. I have two children, my own, and sometimes we just forget that we should be there with them, more. I know that other moms relate to this. Just slow down. And I think this pandemic has been really, really important to make us understand that it's good to slow down sometimes. And also go down to their level, where you can actually see what your children are doing and play with them and listen to them. It's been a very important part of the pandemic for me. Just being able to be present. I think it's an important part. And what I love about moments like this, like for example, this last image, is that it's already a memory. This is like right before the pandemic, and they're already so grown up. It's important to take as many images as you can because life is short.
Beautiful.
Hi, I think I am all done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrizia.
You're welcome.
This is, I could watch this all night long. Okay, so next up is Terra Fondriest. Terra comes to us from her rural mountaintop home, hard to say that, in the Ozarks of Arkansas. They've lived there for the past 11 years after they moved there for her husband's work. It's work is seen through the birth of her two children, the forming of relationships with neighbors and a few new friends, and the daily adventures of dogs, chickens, and wild animals. She had moved there from rural Minnesota, but originally grew up in Joliet, Illinois. The Ozark Hills are her home now, and her family and their daily life and the country is a comfort in this time of uncertainty. Take it away, Terra.
Hi. Thanks, Peter, and everyone else. This is an honor to be here. I've had a difficult time coming up with an introduction. I woke up like 500 times last night thinking of different ways to introduce myself and say that I love photographing my family to capture memories because my kids are only little for so long and stuff. And while that's true, I feel like it's not 100% true. Like Nancy said, for me, this is a big escape in a way. Like I've worked my whole life like starting before high school. I've always had a job. I graduated and I had a job in natural resources. I fought fires. I traveled the country. I worked in the Bob Marshall Wilderness of Montana. I've had these like adventurous jobs. And then all of a sudden we settled down here and we had kids, and I thought I was going to go back to work right away. But then I had my baby and I was like, I just had this, I couldn't. So I decided to stay home with them, and it was awesome. I mean, I loved staying home, but I felt like I still needed that challenge that I always got from working, I guess. So I started picking my camera up more, and I found the National Geographic Your Shot website. I kind of like got started on that, and I discovered there was a genre called family documentary photography. I didn't know anything about it. Photography has always been like a hobby for me, but it wasn't something I had studied at all. So I kind of got into that, and I started looking at the work of some people that I started to like, and kind of trying to copycat it in a way, just learning that way. And then I just got sucked in. I realized that it was something I was really passionate about. I really just love storytelling. And that's kind of where it started. And so I took pictures of our daily life. I tried to get better at my photography skills. I learned about storytelling. I eventually took the Missouri Photo Workshop in 2017, and that built my confidence up a little bit to start photographing outside of my family. So now I've been doing more in the community. But the COVID deal has us kind of stuck at home, and we live out in the woods and stuff, so life hasn't changed a ton. Like our home life hasn't changed. We still have, a couple hundred acres all around us that we can go run around in and stuff. But it's just given me the challenge of photographing our everyday life again. I had kind of gotten away from that for a little bit. And so, let's cue up the pictures here. I know some of the people on this panel have been telling stories for a long time. I guess since 2013, I've really started to get into it and all that. So I've been learning the elements of stories. And so that's what I was gonna kind of go through here. Introducing your characters. So this is me and my son, and my daughter took this picture. My kid taking pictures is something that's kind of fun that we really got into last summer. We did like a family summer project. So this is kind of how I feel on a daily basis. I'm like driving home from the neighbors, and my son's like, I want to drive. And then my daughter's like, I want to drive. And so it's like, okay, well, Henry can drive this time. And Amelia grabbed my camera and took that picture. Arrow key. There we go. That's my husband, and he fights fires. He's a wildland firefighter, and so he travels a lot. So that he's gone, and it's very unpredictable. Like, he would have to leave like tomorrow, just last minute stuff. So I can't really plan anything, and it's just the way our family is and all that. And it's always awesome when Dad's around. He's like the mayhem instigator. So we were butchering our meat chickens here. And these are all pictures from the last couple months from being at home. And this is my daughter and the dog we rescued, Joe, from the local town. And she's my animal lover. So a lot of pictures of her include animals. And then these are the 3 dogs on the left are like dogs that we own. And then the dog on the right is our neighbor's dog that we is like our foster child sometimes. Like he just comes over and visits and stuff. It's kind of fun. So these are all kind of the characters that we deal with on a daily basis here at our house. So then, moving on to like setting the scene and just trying to get photos that show where we live and the scenery. And so this is a tree my daughter found to climb kind of near our home. This is our road. We live at the end of a dirt road. And so like the mud puddles on our road are a big destination for us. Like we get up, we're like, okay, we're going to go walk to the mud puddles and hang out, or we're going to go walk down the road and look for shiny rocks and stuff. So the road is a big scene for us.
Love the toning on that last one. It's really nice. It's such a good look.
Yeah, okay. The road here again is another, I mean, we spend a lot of time on our road. I mean, we're fortunate that there's not too many people that live on here, so I don't have to worry too much about the kids getting like run over. But that dog that I was talking about, Simon, we usually bring him back to the neighbors every night, and my kids like to run on the road and stuff. So I'm driving in the car with bringing the dog back, and they're running and stuff. That's what's going on there. The scene of in our house, they were looking for, I don't know, some popsicle they thought was in there or something, and they're both like searching in there, and our house isn't super big, and so I have like my computer desk is like smack in the middle of the house, and that's just where I leave my camera. So if I see something happening, it takes me like 2 seconds to just grab it and click a picture, which is kind of handy. So moving on to like detail shots, and I had one of my mentors kind of he talked to me about thinking of my story as like a movie, you know, like a movie. If you watch it thinking of it that way, they introduce their characters, and then they don't have to show the character's face all the time. Sometimes they show the character's feet or their hands, but you know it's them and stuff. And so incorporating detail shots is it's a challenge for me, because I've always been like a very literal photographer. So to work on detail shots, this was our neighbor kid. I was sitting at his garage sale last weekend. I think it was 2 weekends ago. Mm. And my son had gotten a splinter, and he was like freaking out about it, but he didn't want anybody else to take it out. So everyone was gathered around trying to pull it. Well, as Henry pulled the splinter out, my husband walking back to the house in an evening, Joe's tail getting caught in the briars. The other part of this is something I struggle with, telling stories and by artifacts and remnants. You know, what did my kids leave behind that can tell a story, or what have they drawn, you know, that would be cool to take a picture of to include in a story. So I think my daughter actually took this picture, and I think my daughter took this picture. Like I said, I struggle with these kind of pictures, but they're important to your story. This was something my daughter was.
I love this one.
Great.
She was on the trampoline throwing her bunny up in the air. I was taking pictures. It was just something fun to do.
It looks like the bunny is jumping.
The ears are great.
Yeah, it took a lot to get it like to where it looked like that. A lot of throwing up in the air. And yeah, just like shutter speed, messing with your app, you know, messing with all the camera stuff. Like, why not do it at home? Why not practice it at home? You know, I feel like for me, that's been the place to practice, so that when my kids get older, and I mean, I've taken a few assignments, but when they get older and they're off on their own, like I'll be to the point with my photography where I can hopefully go out and make money, you know? So it's like, I feel like this is my time to practice and get memory, you know, capture memories for my family too. So that's Simon chasing our car back down the road after we already dropped him off. And this is my daughter with Joe in the morning. So, and then kind of like our neighbors. So think about your story sometimes, you know, who do you interact with outside of your family on a regular basis? So these are our neighbors that we're really close with, and we see them almost every day. So I end up having a lot of pictures of them too. This was a birthday party from the other night. And so moving on to like, I just have a little cluster here of pictures that like my family has taken. So I think my daughter took this picture, and like I said, last summer we did a summer family project where we all had this little Fuji FinePix point and shoot camera that I just put in my pocket, and we all just share it, and we took pictures all summer on that camera, and it was so fun. And I have them like to put together. I haven't actually put them together yet, but it's neat to get everybody's perspectives. So just another kind of thing to to think about. This was like 2 or 3 days ago. We gave Joe a bath. So my daughter had the camera for this one. I had the camera for this one.
Oh, wow.
That's a nice one.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fun to practice all these, different kind of
Great.
stuff. Throw the flash on with it and get some quirky stuff. She took that one. My son, she took that one. And that one. And that one. I threw a whole bunch of pictures in here. Some of our friends. Let's get through these. Killing chickens. Always exciting. Henry throwing a fit. Henry being happy. Henry took that one of our monarch caterpillar. And, cutting hair the other day. Tim, my husband, took that one. When our family does it, I always mark like who took what picture on the computer. And when I do put all this together someday, I would love to say, talk about that. Who took each picture?
Oh.
It's itchy. It's the itchy season here. So I was itching Henry's back. Mom, my back's itchy. And then this is the last picture. So just some closing thoughts. I don't. It might look, I guess, like I take pictures, like just a lot of pictures. Like I always have my camera out, but I want to emphasize, like, there's so much value in not taking pictures, and I don't have my camera out all the time. I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I was really practicing, I had it out a lot more, but I've gotten really picky over time. I mean, the more you photograph your family, like, the pickier I feel like you get. You wait for that good light, you wait for that really interesting moment. It helps you see better. To photograph on a daily basis. So I might pick my camera up for 5 minutes every day or something like that. But even to do that it's good practice. And then the other thing I was going to say is my kids entered a bunch of their pictures into the county fair last summer, and they like won ribbons and they get money and stuff like that. So I mean, they each got a check for like 20, which is a really big deal. And I just thought, I don't know if everybody knows that you can enter picture. Well, like professionals can't, but like your kids and stuff, they can enter pictures. So it'd be kind of a fun project for you this summer to get them to take some pictures and print them out and enter them.
Good idea, Terra.
Yeah. Terra, thank you. I feel like we all just took a trip to your place.
Yeah.
Wonderful. By the way, the open jury call that we have right now does have a youth category.
Oh,
so we're
awesome.
Really hoping to get kids involved in that. So we're going to switch to Christopher Lee. There we go. There's Christopher. Chris was raised in Austin for most of his childhood in a family-run restaurant that his parents started after his father, who was stationed in San Antonio, retired from the Air Force. His parents were both immigrants from Korea. Growing up in a working class immigrant household, he was eager to get out of his hometown to see the world and become a skateboard magazine photographer. So at age 19, he bought a one-way ticket to New York City, where he lived working as a bike messenger, a line cook, and various other jobs until he rediscovered photography through friends and mentors. After years of living in New York City and traveling to different states and countries, Chris decided to move back to Texas, where his brother and sister-in-law still live, in hopes of more consistently photographing stories of immigration, integration, and policy surrounding migration. Chris, where are you?
I am at the, let's see, what does it say? It says, "Welcome to Colorado County Safety Rest Area" by the Texas Department of Transportation. So I'm guessing it's Colorado County. It's like some weird, it's like this weird kind of farmland county, sort of halfway between Houston and San Antonio. And I'm kind of sitting on a bench next to the doors of the women's and the men's restrooms, so I'm getting some weird looks from a lot of people that are stopping in.
Can I just add that you actually do have a home, but you just came from assignment, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I live in San Antonio, and I just came off of, I just finished up the last shoot of an assignment that I was, of a story that I was working on in Houston. And I wish I could show you guys the pictures. I think it actually fits in pretty well over here. I'm working on this story for the New York Times about the rise in domestic violence during COVID-19, the pandemic, and the kind of idea is without going into too much detail, is like kind of subverting this idea of what a safe home or being safe at home kind of really means for a good chunk of the population, you know, men, women, youth. So it's, you know, just kind of looking at the effects of what's going on. And yeah, so I guess I'll kind of like intro myself a little bit. The idea of home is, it's a bit fluid. It's always been a bit fluid for me. You know, as like, you know, as some of y'all might experience, like, you know, being a first generation American, you know, you're always kind of caught in between two cultures and two kind of motherlands and everything like that. And especially growing up, you know, kind of being, usually for me at least, being me and my brother were the only ones that kind of looked like, you know, there weren't that many people that looked like us. And growing up, you know, and I've always kind of wanted to like get away and like, and see the world, kind of like get out of like my hometown, you know, cue your cheesy emo song, you know. And it's and I did, you know, you know, this job has literally taken me all over the world into places that I've never ever dreamed of going. And, you know, doing that for a while, I kind of came to a point in my career and the work and the kind of work that I wanted to produce. And I wanted to look a little bit more at what where I grew up, my hometown. And that kind of coincided with photographing the death of my grandmother, who our family matriarch at the time. And so about almost a year ago, I moved back to Texas, kind of in hopes of photographing and telling the stories of, you know, the kind of like the issues that I grew up with, you know, and migration and integrating into like this American society and everything like that. The problem is that in order for me to make a living at doing this, I take assignments or I pitch, you know, I pitch stories where the stories are. And I'd say for the last almost 7.5 months or so of 2019 going into 2020, even though I was living in San Antonio, I actually had not spent very much time there. And this has actually been kind of like the longest stretch of time that I haven't actually gone anywhere. Like usually I wouldn't stay in San Antonio or in Texas for that matter for longer than 5 days, because I would kind of be off doing something else in another part of the country or another country for that matter. And so this is kind of been this interesting opportunity to look at the stories I promised myself that I would kind of follow and tell and photograph and everything like that. And I think I might actually be the odd one out in the fact that I'm not showing y'all any pictures of my actual home. The pandemic was an opportunity to tell the stories of the people around me, the people that like in the state that I grew up in, and I thought for a while that I wanted nothing to do with, but I came back, you know, and like these are the things that I, you know, this is the opportunity to kind of like talk and learn about and photograph the things that really make up, I think, like some of the really important issues in our country. And the thing that I always kind of said was I started saying about this pandemic is, if there is any sort of silver lining, it's kind of given us the opportunity to kind of talk about a lot of the issues that normally wouldn't have that spotlight on us. And yeah, let's go with the pictures. one of the first things I actually worked on, when all this happened was kind of, in my mind, the most Texas story you can ever imagine, which is livestock cattle ranchers. We kind of know now that looking at the news coming out that the livestock industry and meat processing plants and all that stuff has kind of taken a huge hit. This is all kind of before that started happening, and what I did was kind of thought about like the people that in the production line that would suffer the most if things kind of went belly up, and these small time ranchers are small businesses. They're small businesses. They're people that employ a modest amount of people in their rural towns, and they're always, and coming from a small business background from a family restaurant, you're always living on the margins economically, and these small town cattle auctions that were the lifelines for these ranchers, especially those that had cattle on feed, that like the last step before you take it to the take them to slaughter to the meat processing plants that makes the hamburgers and the steaks that we all get at the grocery store. These auctions were a lifeline for their business and their livelihoods, and quite frankly the town, and they were being shut down because of COVID, or they were facing these kind of these hurdles in order to like get them to actually function the way that they're supposed to function. And so it was interesting. This was well before like these Tyson plants and meat processing plants infection blooms were happening, but I was listening in on some of their phone calls that they were having with some of their partners on some of these plants, and this was weeks before, and they were all, this is going to happen. The plants are going to get hit, and we're going to have like it's going to cause like a lot of economic problems. It's going to cause a lot of health problems, and never did I realize that it would get to this point. And so, yeah, that was one of the things that kind of exemplified. I'm showing y'all two stories that I worked on, amongst other things, we talk about where we production lines and where we get our food and our supplies and everything, and this has kind of given us an opportunity as a nation and the world, quite frankly, to kind of probe and question and analyze who makes the things that we enjoy, that we buy at the store, where does it get made, and how does it affect our economy, both on a large scale and on a very local scale as well. This was shot for the Wall Street Journal. The next thing that I worked on, that was actually one of the first stories that I worked on that I ended up pitching and working on for the New York Times, actually, was this something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is how does immigration look like during this pandemic? And this was early March, I believe, the first half of March, and we were all talking about, at the time, and rightfully so, these cities that were very vulnerable to the pandemic. You look at like New Orleans and Seattle and New York and Detroit, but one of the things that was really weighing on my mind at the time, especially because my family has had run-ins with immigration, the immigration courts, and having had family members been detained that were undocumented, been detained at border checkpoints, was what was happening to the migrant camp for the Central American migrants stuck at the border in Matamoros, which is the small Mexican city right on the other side of the border from Brownsville in the Rio Grande Valley. You know, this was an opportunity to kind of look at what our policies in our nation in America has done, and what kind of, you know, responses that were going on, or maybe a lack of responses that were going on during this global pandemic. You know, these are people that are directly affected by the MPP, the Migration Protection Protocols that instated by our current administration. You know, these are people that are stuck in this weird no man's land, that have no option of social distancing, have no option for real healthcare. You know, these mobile clinics run by global response management, which is like this kind of medical and nonprofit. I actually met these guys in Iraq when I was there in 2017, but it was interesting to see some friendly faces. But you know, they were the only ones, and it was just kind of like this garage band medical clinic, you know, that had no real capabilities. I mean, they've since now have built a more robust infrastructure over there, but at the time, there was no way to test for COVID. You know, they can say that there's no COVID there, there's no virus infections there, but how can you know when you don't even have the capability of even testing for that? And you know, they're exposed to the elements. You know, they're burning scrap wood and sometimes treated wood, and for a source of fire to cook their meals, and you know, that creates respiratory problems. They're exposed to the elements that creates respiratory problems, and you know, when we talk about some of the most vulnerable of the vulnerables to the pandemic, you know, we have to look at the people that are affected by the American policies and that are caught in between, that don't really have very many choices and very many resources to take advantage of. So yeah, so that's kind of like what I was working on, and it's this and kind of like, you know, I continue to work on these issues, like things that have been affecting the people in and around where I'm from, my hometown, my home state, where I did a lot of my growing up in, and that, you know, I'm compelled by these stories, and you know, while it might not be your traditional sense of what home is, this is, you know, we're all kind of like living in this space together. And I think that one of the really incredible opportunities that this and motivations that this like being kind of stuck here in the state has given me is to look deeper into these issues, and have an opportunity to have an audience that'll listen to it, you know. And I think that I think that in and of itself is very important. So
thank you very much, Chris. Thank you. We're going to move on to Kirsten. And I'll tell you right now, we're going to go a few minutes over because we want to be able to take, we've got just a few good questions, but I do want to take a few questions, but I want to give Kirsten time to present her pretty spectacular photos. So let me just say this about Kirsten, and all of these intros, as you can see, are more around kind of how they got to where they are. They really don't have much to do with photography as a technique or a skill or work. But Kirsten was born in southeastern Connecticut, but never felt like she fit in. A depressed and conservative area, there was little opportunity for artists. So after moving around for education and work, she settled in the Outer Banks for a few years. And even with a lucrative business and supportive social life, the fit still didn't feel right. So she relocated to Denver, where she had good friends. While not blood related, they had been the definition of family for Kirsten. And in her late 30s, she wanted to finally create a home near people who knew and accepted her at her best and her worst. She's been in Colorado for about 7 years. and she has no desire to relocate because of the incredible people who continue to support and inspire her. Kirsten?
And that being said, it's funny because this has, I really relate to both Christopher and Ed, because this is the longest I've stayed in one spot in my home that I desired in over 5 years. My average for the last 5 years has been on the road 250 plus days a year. It's so much. And it has just become a norm for me. Half my work is out of the country, and then the other half of the work is around the US. And 4 years ago, so you do the math, a year into that traveling, I got pregnant with my husband and had a baby. And I'm actually going to cue the photos now. So, oops, I think that one's ahead a little bit.
Sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me stop this for a second.
I mean, I can skip what I was going to say.
No. Kirsten, please keep talking for a minute.
Oh, okay. Well.
Yes, just talk for a second. Let me fix this.
Okay, well, I wasn't going to share this, but I guess I will. My background's in child psych. I have a degree in child psychology. I was a teacher. And so for me, relating to photographing family, especially children, has seemed very comfortable to me. I never thought I'd be able to marry both my educational background, which is completely not art, with my photographic background. And I think that's kind of what pushed me into being a full-time documentary photographer, where my concentration is with families and with children. If we're talking about why I photograph my own family, this is really off the cuff. I don't know where all this is coming from while we do some time here.
We are ready.
Oh, we are? Okay, good.
Maybe this will fit in.
Okay, there we go.
Let me give you so sorry about that.
It's okay. This is my home. Because I'm on the road so much, for me, home is the people who I love the most that I get to experience or build that with. I found this quote from M.K. Soni that said, "A house is made of brick and mortar. A home is made by the people who live there." And so that idea that I've had about these people being my home has made it a lot easier for me to travel, because no matter where I go, I'm home. My daughter went on her first trip when she was 8 weeks old, and since then, she has been to 23 different countries. I nursed her full-time for 2 straight years, and so for those 2 straight years, she was always with me on the road. Planes, trains, automobiles, boats, you name it. I felt a little bit guilty because she's gone to these incredible places that she might not go to again, right? But I know that by photographing her experience in these places, that there is evidence of that, and hopefully it will help cement a certain memory that she will have, even though she physically won't have the memory there. I've taken her, really fun places, some harder to get to than others. This was in the Turks and Caicos. This is in a teeny tiny village of about 15 people at the top of a mountain in Slovenia, where they raised deer.
Oh, that's insane.
Yeah. An island off of Spain where I got to teach. The hilltops of Valdron, France. Also, I don't know about anybody else, but like one of the most beautiful things that's come from being a photographer is I make these friends around the world. And so they get to give me experiences when I'm traveling that you might not necessarily get to have otherwise. This is an island in Croatia. This is on her very first birthday in Buenos Aires. And you may judge me, but no, we didn't have her in a car seat. We don't travel with car seats when we go to these countries. And so this is probably the one and only time she'll ever get to do this at this age. So with that idea in mind, I was working in the Outer Banks. I had a very lucrative job as a wedding photographer, and I was doing family sessions on the beach. They were all documentary driven, but I wanted more storytelling. I came from an editorial background. I worked as a contract photographer for a magazine for 7 years. I was missing that next step or that depth of real storytelling. And so I started doing day in the life sessions. And that is the majority of my photography work right now. I spent anywhere between 24 and 72 hours with a family just documenting their life. And so what I thought I would do is quickly just share with you some tips and some approaches that I have to photographing real life that you can apply to your own lives. The first thing is just photographing routine. I feel like routine is evidence of how we love one another in a very subtle, simple, but understood way. And as children, that's ingrained in us, our experiences, our memories of routine. And so to have that evidence of that when they're older is a really beautiful thing. I really like showing how parents double duty during routine. Not everything is perfect, not everything is happy, and I embrace that and show that to my families so that they can see and are reminded of how hard they work and how hard they love. Additionally, with routine, I'm able to show parents how their kids experience routine, sometimes without the parents seeing it happening. Even the most simple of things like at dinner, I am looking for photos, just one photo to represent that routine for that family. I photograph this family every year. They're in England, and every year every dinner, they always have a glass of red wine. So this was the second year I photographed them. I was so happy that I made this photo for them. You know, there's things that especially moms do that we think we're the only ones that do it, or we think we're the only ones who struggle. And by making these pictures and putting them out there for the world, in a way, parents feel less alone, right? They can identify with this. From really quiet moments, trying to create more art for my families. Again, it's this idea of showing that they exist in this space of love that they don't get to see otherwise. Teeny tiny funny moments that represent parenting. This is my daughter. The next thing is I am not afraid to photograph the uncomfortable. She was totally fine. She did take a nosedive into the puddle, and I did spend 30 seconds to photograph this before I put the camera down, and I was a mom. I get a lot of questions about how do you juggle being a parent and a photographer at the same time. A lot of the times when a camera is in my hand, I am no longer a parent. And so a lot of times I do that when I have my husband around. I'm sure as she gets older, she's going to really understand that I'm not a parent when I have a camera in my hand. So she's going to start taking advantage of that. I like showing that the struggle of the nighttime routine, that it's not comfortable all the time, that parents do get tired, that there are fights, there are arguments, and that is all part of life at home, wherever your home is. That is part of life. Joy and conflict and struggle. It's another time where I took my camera out and I was a photographer first. Then I picked it up. She was fine. Another thing is one thing I learned very quickly on in my career photographing kids is that they repeat their behavior over and over and over again. It's like one of the best pieces of advice I can give for anyone photographing kids. There's only 3 reasons really why they'll stop. The reasons why they keep doing it is if they fail at something, they're going to keep doing it till they succeed. If they are succeeding at it, they will keep doing it until A, they get bored, B, they get hurt, or C, they get in trouble, right? And so, especially with kids when they're doing things that are a little bit naughty, they will test me and slowly start doing the naughty stuff in front of me. And then once they realize I'm like not stopping them, then there's no stopping them, and they will continue doing it because I'm on their side and I'm not going to tell on them. It doesn't take long for me to get trust from the kids that I'm photographing. Like I said, it's kind of like our little secret, what they do. And I never tell the parents what I've seen them do. They get to see that when I deliver the photos. This little boy, another like little tip is use your ears and your predictive skills as much as you're using your eyes. In this case, this little boy just kept grabbing himself, and I knew he was going to pee, even though he's technically in the house. And I was mentoring actually at the time. And I was like, I think he's going to pee right here. And she's like, there's no way. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I think he's going to pee in the house. And she wasn't prepared for it. And I got that shot. Kids aren't the only ones that'll do naughty stuff and keep doing it until they get in trouble or they get hurt, or in this case, kill the baby. I was in the bathroom, I came out, he was doing this. This is my husband and my daughter. And I was like, I do not think that that's safe. Like, I don't think that's regulation. Like, I think that we would definitely get called by social services. And he just was like, but she's loving it. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to photograph it then. Right. I do take the risk to photograph things that potentially could be dangerous. Another thing is to try and push yourself to shoot a little less literally. I like to play with my compositions and how I'm filling the frame, and creating the unexpected photos of family life, of real life, playing with negative space and playing with anonymity. It's one of my favorites I took a couple of years ago. It actually has a title. I don't have a lot of photos that have titles. It's called Pet Balloon. It really did feel like there was just a little bit of helium in it, and it literally felt like it was his pet and he was taking it on a walk. And so I shot it less literally to really emphasize that idea, what I wanted to express or visually articulate, which was he's taking his balloon, his pet balloon, on a walk.
That's great.
I like seeing myself in the work I make as well. A less literal, anonymous photo, but I spent a lot of time being imaginative and playing by myself as a kid. I preferred that a lot of the time. And I remember when this was happening, I could almost transport myself into her space, into her body. I don't know what she was thinking looking at her shadow, but I imagined, I almost had a memory of me doing it as a kid. The other thing is I like to play with different tools. I got a drone recently last year, and I've been having fun playing with that. A really cheap underwater point and shoot camera that gives me a different perspective. And I use my phone. If I don't have a camera nearby, I'm using my phone to make pictures. For me, it's not really about the gear. It's just about what I have to say or what I want to say, and finding a way to visually articulate that regardless of my tool. And the last is I'm someone who really believes that at the end of the day, I just need to make one picture to represent an experience. This happened to be a contract I was on, and we spent the entire day at a amusement park. I don't 100% recommend it if you have any sort of motion sickness. I threw up after photographing on the swings, but I just had to pull myself back together. But I got on this ride on the roller coaster, and I worked for this one picture. The entire ride, I just kept the same composition and tried to get this one photo. Same with this. This was actually a birth, and when I shoot births, I do 3 days of birth. The birth, the next day, and then when they bring the family, the baby back home. And so I was working really for just one photo that represented what life was like immediately introducing a third baby to a family with 2 younger kids and a crazy dog. My daughter is obsessed with boobs. I think because I nursed her too long, or not too long, but I nursed her a long time. She still grabs at me and I'm 4, but she nurses her baby dolls. Also, because my husband and I both have tattoos everywhere, all of her baby dolls, all their faces look like this. They all are covered. And so I just need to I've been working on this photo for a long time. I'm still working on it, but I did love this one. Just her tenderness, her instinct for being nurturing, and also representing the fact that she's drawn all over her baby. This is from Slovenia again. I actually dropped a hard drive and all my personal work was not backed up. So I lost an entire year of my daughter's life. And I only had 5 photos from this magical 3 days. And this was one of 5. But at the end of the day, I'm okay because this one photo just brings me back to that entire time. And for that, I'm grateful. And I find resolve in that I can have just one photo that represents that experience. The other thing is just to be patient. And when you see opportunity, you can squirrel it away. This was camping in the backyard last year. I saw that light coming through and my daughter and the dog were running around, and I knew there was an opportunity to perhaps make a silhouette of it. It didn't happen day one. It just didn't come together, but I kept looking at it, looking at that scene. And so the next day this came together and I was able to make the shot. So I call that squirreling it away. Like a squirrel saves their nuts. They don't eat it at the time. I kind of squirrel away pictures a lot. Again, she had done this a million times, but I hadn't really gotten the photo yet. So finally she did it at the right time of day and I thought naked was best. So it's another example of squirreling an idea away. I saw the opportunity for this photo. It was not coming together. It wasn't the right situation. They were like doing handstands and stuff, but everything was merging. And then they went off to another area in the park. And so I hadn't given up on the photo, but I knew that I hadn't gotten it yet. And then I heard them say, again, use your ears as much as everything else. I heard them say, hey, do you want to race back to the car? And I wasn't sure they were going to run through this space, but I hoped that they would. So I ran ahead of them. And thankfully, this is where they ran. And this was about 40 minutes after I'd had this initial idea, and I was able to get the shot then. So you never know, like you might try a photo and it doesn't come together. You're not able to execute it at that moment, but don't give up on that. Again, like I said, kids, humans, but especially kids repeat their behavior. So you always have this opportunity or potential that it could happen again and give you the picture. The main reason why I shoot my family and why I shoot home is, again, going back to this idea of psychology. And there is something called childhood amnesia. We've all had it. Children do not retain solid memory until they reach around age 6 to 7. Most memories before that will go away. And my biggest fear is I'm going to die before then. It's happened in my family with parents dying young, too young for their kids to physically remember them. And so for me, I photograph her all the time so that there's evidence where I can show her how much I loved her and how much I was a part of her life in the event that I die before she reaches that age where I am cemented in her mind. I have my husband photograph us a lot. I hire a photographer 2 times a year so that there is evidence without a shadow of doubt that I loved her when she was this small and that she loved me and that we had a relationship. And that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very much. We have a couple of questions. We don't have any time, but we do have a couple of questions. There's one in particular that I do want to ask. and it came from Teresa, and I'll expand on this. The question was, what if you live alone? What suggestions do you have for doing this documentation? And I'll expand that to say, what if you're just not at the home that you normally are? There's a lot of people that, Nancy, I mean, you got stuck in Hawaii for quite a while. So if you're not in this like really warm home, what do you do about the home that you're in? How do you pick up a camera and document that? Any of you?
I can go.
Okay.
One of the things I work with a lot of documentary photographers, but especially during this time with pandemic, I actually have a lot of students that are home alone. And one of the things I've done is remind them that the camera is an extension of who they are, and they can still be storytellers. And that the story doesn't have to be presented to them and them responding to it. They can actually access stories that they have inside and create conceptual work that represents those stories. And so that's one thing that I would suggest, is that they can still be storytellers within their home, expressing how they feel about things, experiences they've had, things they want to work through, relationships they've had by themselves in their home by creating conceptual storytelling work.
Anybody else? Another question from An Lee. Documentary photography is deeply intimate and often very focused on a particular subject. How do you find a target audience that connects deeply with your work? And I'm going to expand on that, because for most of you, that could be a commercial or a published audience. How can people use these pictures? If they don't have a commercial or a published outlet, what can you do with these photos other than just collect them?
I'll give that one a crack. I think I don't want to sound well. I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but I think that's the wrong question to ask. That if you truly are committed to doing this work, and you know that the act of creating the work should be enough, and that as I said earlier, if you create things, good things. If you create work, good things will happen. And you know, sometimes we get in the way of ourselves because we worry too much about the end result, and that again, there is nothing more beautiful in life, regardless of what you do, when you find something you sincerely believe in or you want to learn more about, and you just go and you do it. And so I don't mean to be like obnoxious or arrogant with that comment, but I understand we need to make a living and all that. But anyway, that would just be my off the cuff thought to that question. I mean, a more practical answer would be that find things you care about, but that you know that will be relevant to other people. That's the practical answer.
Okay. I see unanimous head nodding. Kristen McNicholas asked, this was to Terra specifically, but any of you can take this. What qualities in photo editors have you gravitated toward, and how have they supported your work?
Hey, Kristen. Photo editors have helped me a ton, like both by just them editing and me seeing how they edit, to them reaching out and going one-on-one and talking about my work and, you know, helping sequence and all that kind of stuff. But I can remember back to like the National Geographic Your Shot, to go back to those days. And when I first got started on there was an editor that always, she edited the Daily Dozen. So there was 12 pictures that they highlighted from the community each day. And I just loved her style. Like she chose quiet images that always had some sort of quirkiness to them. And I don't know, it was almost like the basis for me starting to really love this genre, because I loved her eye. So, and over the course of that community and stuff, I saw different editors and their different choices. And I began to realize that, like, I was trying to get my pictures chosen by the editors. And it was like, I didn't think that they had different opinions of what a good picture was. And coming to that realization was huge for me, because it was like, well, you know, one might like this picture and one might not. That's where my vision comes in. You know, that's where I can start to say, well, this is what I like, and this is why I like it. And that's not to say to throw out their opinion, but to base all of your photography on, you know, what one or two editors thinks is not the way to go. I mean, it's there's so many different styles out there. But what was the question?
The question was, what qualities in photo editors have you gravitated toward? I think you answered that.
Okay, good. Yeah. Kristen's an awesome photo editor. I love her.
Oh, that was a trick question.
No, no, but she's, yes, anyways.
Okay. One question for Christopher. Somebody wanted to know, this is more on the assignment side, what's the ratio of story ideas that you pitch versus assignments given to you, or a combination of the two?
Yeah, that's like the eternal struggle. Because I think if we were all independently wealthy and money was no object, we wouldn't have to take jobs that we didn't necessarily feel super passionate about. But I think I definitely get a lot more assignments than I do my pitches getting approved, for sure. Because I recognize at a certain point that I may feel strongly about XYZ, but that might not be the case for a particular editor or particular publication's audience. And I think that's one of the things that's really unique, that's given this unique opportunity, is because we've been able to like kind of give a spotlight to a lot of the things that we can't necessarily pitch normally, or have a hard time getting off the ground. But I think at a certain point, you always want to kind of keep pitching your ideas. You always want to always talk about the ideas to the people that not only the people that will listen, but the people that might that you want to get your work seen by, or your ideas acknowledged by. You always want to be talking about it. You always want to be, if you can, you want to be photographing it and producing it, and show, and because like the idea is that if you're pitching something, you care about it, or you're at the very least you have some modicum of interest in it. And I think that one of the things that's always kind of resonated with me was my mentor always said this, and I think Ed actually was one of the people that really was really advertised this as well, is that if there's something that you want to pitch or a series that you want to pitch, or if there's ideas you want to pitch, be known to be that person, you know? And I think that like Ed has been working on this documentary project about kidney disease, right? For a bajillion years. And so, you know, potato, right? But Ed has always kind of gone out and said, I want to work on this. I need to be known as the kidney disease guy. And I think that that's a really good way of having that ratio kind of work out in your favor, is if you're known to be passionate about this, if you're known to be an authority about this, if you're known to be associated with this even tangentially, like you're going to have more people not only have a lot of trust in you to do a really great job, but they're going to know that you're going to be just plain out invested in the work, and you're going to come out with a really great product.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to make this the last question, because I think this applies to almost everything we've seen tonight. This is from Margarita Birnbaum. And how do you establish trust with the people that you're photographing, especially at home, and especially if it's just a one-time assignment? And I know that Kirsten talked about that a little bit, but it'd be nice to hear a couple of the other photographers talk about that.
I can chime in. So I think so much about gaining that trust is going back to, I mentioned vulnerability. And I think when you are photographing someone, you know, it's not just, it has to be this give and take. It's not just, you know, you're taking. There has to be this back and forth. And I have found in my work, especially in assignment work where you don't have very much time with someone, that to establish this connection quickly, finding common ground is really helpful. I once photographed this guy who had just gotten out of prison after 20 years, and he was visibly uncomfortable being photographed. And I was very anxious because I just started freelancing with the New York Times and was like, what do I do? Like, I really want to take a nice picture that, you know, says something and that supports him. So ultimately I put my camera down and I was like, do I make you nervous? And he said, yes. And I was like, well, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. I've never made anyone nervous. So I sat down with him and we just started talking. And I just, you know, I started revealing things about me. And at some point, as I'm just rolling off facts about myself, which anyone who knows me knows that I'm, you know, you make eye contact with me, I'll tell you everything. And I said, I was like, I had just turned 29, and he kind of stopped me in my tracks and was like, I have 2 daughters who are 29. And I was like, okay, like, there you go. Like, and we just immediately, things changed. And he really opened up, and we were also in this very sterile environment. And ultimately, after I took a few more photographs of him, I was like, can we get out of here? Let's go someplace where you feel comfortable. Like, and just like, show me your world. And he did, and that led to a much more interesting, I think, powerful portrait.
Uh-oh.
We lost Nancy.
Nancy froze. Nancy, you're frozen. We'll give it a couple of seconds. Can you believe we've gone this long and nothing's happened?
You know, have that vulnerability shared. You want someone to trust you, which is a lot to ask of people. I think photographers forget sometimes what we're asking of people when we kind of dive into their lives and into their personal space. You only remember it when suddenly the camera's turned on you and you're like, ah.
Oh, yeah.
That's all.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. I want to remind you that Patrizia has a workshop coming up very soon, and that Nancy is going to be judging our open call around this same theme with the youth category. So tell your friends who have children. And
how young? Just kidding.
It doesn't matter. Anything under 18, we don't care. I
don't think my 7-month-old doesn't know how to use his hands yet.
Have you tried? I think Terra can help you with that. Thank you very, very much to everybody on the panel, to everybody who showed up and stuck with us. This has been recorded. We haven't figured out exactly what to do with the recording yet, but it will be available in some way. And we hope to see you at another DCP event, or maybe show up in our membership role. So thanks very much and good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.